So one of the things Mark was going to do was give you some definitions of diversity and inclusion. My colleague, Stacy Swanby, who's a visitor services manager at the Broad, and an all-around, amazing woman, shared an article with me recently with some great examples of the meaning of some words that are used on this topic. The author is Dafina Lazarus Stewart, and the article is called Language of Appeasement from InsideHigherEd.com. Diversity asks, who's in the room? Equity responds, who is trying to get in the room but can't? Whose presence in the room is under constant threat of erasure? Inclusion asks, has everyone's ideas been heard? Justice responds, whose ideas won't be taken as seriously because they aren't in the majority? Okay. Let's see how this thing works. Okay. The museum field, the profession I love, has to make the commitment to change. It is not a choice, it is an obligation. And it should not be an onerous obligation. We should live up to our stated ideals. If we truly believe that we are a better profession when we embrace diversity, then let that diversity permeate and shape the staff throughout our museums, galleries, science centers, and zoos. It is in our power to change this profession if we have the courage, the creativity, and the will. That was Lonnie Bunch 17 years ago in Museum News magazine. So this is not a new conversation. So, you're applying for a job as prep. You have lots of experience as an art handler, plus you're friends with someone on the crew, and they put in a good word with your boss, so your resume gets looked at first. Then you go to the interview, and it turns out maybe you went to the same art school as one of the interviewers, or you grew up in the same state. You really hit it off, and you get the job. Or you're applying for a job as a prep. You have lots of experience as an art handler, but you don't know anyone on the crew, and maybe your resume never gets looked at. Maybe it gets looked at but passed by in favors of others, equally qualified, who have connections with those in charge or those on the crew. This is me. I'm an experienced art handler. I hire other experienced art handlers. If I could, I might hire a team that looked like this. Because we're most comfortable with folks like us, right? Actually, my team would probably look more like this. Because I have the same bias towards men being strong as everyone else who was raised in this country, and because I'm, like everyone, most comfortable with those who are most like us. Basically, the system is rigged when it comes to hiring people, and we need to unrig the system so that everybody gets their foot in the door. We need to unrig the system so that our teams start reflecting the communities that they're in. When we work with people from all different backgrounds, ages, places, races, ethnicities, genders, sexual orientations, etc., we have that many more ideas to work with, and that makes us more creative and more innovative. Plus, it's just the right thing to do. This chart is from the Andrew Mellon Foundation survey from 2015, and it was kind of the first time that it was quantified how white art museum staffs are, and also how long-lasting the problem is. The survey showed that if you look at staff of different ages, the problem persists. It's not getting better as younger people are coming into the museums. This chart, this one, is showing, let's see, preparators, about 85% white, non-Hispanic. This is also one of the more optimistic-looking surveys. Some data shows worse numbers. So, and here's the male-female ratio for preps. Throughout the survey, jobs are broken down so that you can see which professions are doing better than others. When you look at the numbers all together, it looks a lot better because there's these jobs that are traditionally, like facilities and security, that are traditionally much more heavily minority, that skew the numbers. So this was really a really good way to show that leadership positions and positions that are leading to decision-making roles are doing really badly when it comes to diversity. Okay. So I looked at our crew as well, and we were reflecting these numbers. I became aware of the study last year while I was trying to figure out why more people of color and women weren't making it into the interview stage of hiring on my crew. Here's some of the Broad preps right now. And then I'm going to show you just some cool pictures of what we do. We do stuff like this, and this, this, and this. There's another cool thing. There's a big old photo. When I got hired as head prep in 2014, it was just me and Joe. And we would hire 5 or 6 contract preparators as needed. This was before we moved into our fancy new museum. That's the Broad. So I hired the crew of 18 people to install the inaugural exhibition at the Broad. This was our first team meeting before conference room chairs were even delivered. That's our freight elevator. So the inequity on our team was largely on my shoulders, and it weighed really heavily on me. It turns out that I was using a rigged hiring system without even realizing it. The traditional approach to hiring leaves a lot of room for improvement. And also, one of the biggest problems I think with museums is we think we're the good guys. So if you're not aware that you're part of the problem, then you're really part of the problem. Good intentions are not enough. We realized we had to take action to change ourselves, check our own biases, and also change the systems that create and perpetuate disparities. So, some of the changes we made to our system. We now look at every single resume, and we don't decide who moves on to the next stage until we look at every resume. This one act made a huge difference. So I used to, look at 20, 25 resumes if I needed to hire 5 or 10 people, and then once I got enough qualified people, I'd start calling for phone interviews. But the bigger the set of resumes you can collect before you do that, the more diverse the group will be, because the chances of a very broad cross-section of people applying for a job in any one time period is so slim. The longer you can stretch out the time period for collecting resumes, the better. We no longer give preference to referrals. If you have a homogeneous team and you give preference to referrals, you perpetuate the problem. Okay. Are you one of those folks who reads a job description and is like, I don't know, I better not apply because I'm not sure I have all the qualifications that it takes to get the job? Or are you like, I can do that, plus whatever I don't know already, I can learn? Statistics show that if you're a woman, you probably fall in the former category, and if you're a man, you probably fall in the latter. Rewriting job descriptions has an impact on who applies to the job. So when I started trying to reach more folks with opportunities, I looked at our job description again and realized there were 2 completely unnecessary qualifications on there: a 4-year degree in art or art history, and also that the candidate should have their own reliable transportation. Neither of these things, we didn't need either of these things. The college degree, we absolutely don't need to be a preparator, right? I mean, it's not a prerequisite. I think it's good to have people who have both experiences. I also ran our job description through Textio, which is an online app that helps you reduce jargon, because corporate jargon reduces the number of people who apply to a job. And it also checks for masculine or feminine leaning language. So that's something that a lot of people are using nowadays too. We've started posting our job listings in different places. I started asking HR, where are you posting the position? And we started talking about it. We started posting at more community colleges and just being more thoughtful. We change this all the time. We experiment all the time. We no longer go with our guts. I thought I had really good instincts about hiring people, and I hired really well, and I think I did, but I also am realizing that, like most people, I'm biased towards those like me. On my team, I had a disproportionate number of Midwestern, white, 40-something sculptors. Guess what? Yeah. Shocking. In fact, Curtis, that first guy on the slide, where's Curtis? There he is. Is from the same state as I am. He's my lead prep. So, sculptor, well, he's not in his 40s, and he's not a woman, so, okay. If you want to check your own biases, Google the Implicit Association Test, or IAT test, managed by Harvard University under Project Implicit. It's very enlightening. We no longer compare candidates to each other. We compare them to a scoring rubric. A scoring rubric measures core competencies and predetermined qualifications, and it's a much more objective, fairer way to rate each candidate. This is what a scoring rubric might look like. Each interviewer would fill out one of these forms for each candidate. And then the interviewers would fill out the forms before talking to each other about the candidate. So you're getting your impressions based on specific criteria down on paper before you discuss the candidate. Ideally, you also have a diverse interview team. So having more than one interviewer is important. That way you can check each other's biases. And then the questions that are on the rubric all have to relate back to the essential qualifications of the job. Okay? So changing these things alone, these are all free things, right? Changing these things alone has already changed our team, bringing in brilliant people with different voices and perspectives and enabling us to kick ass even better than we did before. And I hope it goes without saying that we still choose the most qualified people for the job. We're just expanding the number of people who find out about the opportunities. Last year, we also began a paid Preparators apprenticeship program. The Broad Diversity Apprenticeship Program, or DAP, builds pathways to arts and culture jobs by training new recruits and upskilling existing staff from communities that are underrepresented. Amina, on the left, was the first prep apprentice. She was a candidate who came in for an interview with Curtis and I, or Curtis and me, sorry, grammar police. And she lacked the number of years of experience that we needed, but she was so passionate about wanting to be a prep. She was in a museum studies department, and she begged us for an internship. Halfway through the interview, I stopped the interview. I said, you just don't have the experience that we need for our collection. But, and we used the rest of her time to just give her some career advice and beg her to come back in a year. But I couldn't get her out of my head, so I went to the deputy director about a week after we interviewed her and asked if I could make her an apprentice. He said, yes, and let's start a program. So, while researching existing programs like these, I realized the unique position that preps have in museums. So we don't require a college degree to be successful, and yet we're in a respected field, and we're in a position where we can move into jobs that are into decision-making roles. We can become lead preps, we can go become conservation techs, we can go into registration. There's a lot of movement, and we're already at the middle kind of level of the organization. We're not entry-level employees. So the fact that we don't have to go through a college program means that we can make change a lot faster on our teams than all of these programs, which do require that you're either a college student or a recent graduate. So our pilot program was underway, and we offered the next apprenticeship to Luis. Oops. That's Luis with his thumb up. Luis was a day porter, which is basically a custodian, who had been looking for growth opportunities. He was super eager and worked really hard, and while he wasn't specifically interested in being a preparator, his supervisors and we wanted to give him an opportunity to learn some new skills, and he jumped on it. So, meanwhile, we also wrote a grant to formalize and expand the apprenticeship program and partner with the City of LA Department of Cultural Affairs, LACMA, the Craft and Folk Art Museum, Artex, Cook's Crating, and other organizations. And if the grant gets awarded, we'll be able to hire and train up to 18 apprentices full-time for up to 9 months each as art handlers. Yeah. Thank you. So, after winging it for the first 2 apprenticeships, we're adding more structure and have now made the apprenticeship program an upskilling opportunity for our existing visitor services staff. They're kind of perfect because while we're changing out major galleries, there's fewer of them needed. They're full-time, or they are permanent staff, whereas the facilities staff actually work for an outside contractor, so that's more complicated. And same with our security staff. Also, there's 120 of them, and they there's a lot of them are really interested in moving on to other careers. So until we find out about the grant, we've decided to identify 1 apprentice for each major exhibition change-out. And we're using this, the hirings of those people to test new methods like using written essay questions and aptitude tests and scoring rubrics so that, the basis isn't, they're not being rated solely on their verbal communication skills, which is only one of the necessary skills to be a prep. So we just finished using this process to hire the first DAP VSA apprentice, Des, who's on the left, and she's currently working with us as we speak, changing over the first floor galleries. Our goal is to continue striving for equity and justice, and for the crew and all staff eventually to reflect the city of Los Angeles, which might mean that we end up looking more like this. And to get there, we have to keep questioning our own biases and trying to break stereotypes, and make sure opportunities to get onto our team reach the widest possible range of people, and that everyone on our team is heard, respected, and has access to growth opportunities. That way we can bring our best ideas when we get to do cool stuff like this. So no matter what your job is, you can take action to make change. And I encourage you to follow up with me directly if this is something you're passionate about, if you have questions, or if you have information to contribute. This is something really dear to my heart right now. These are some references and research, and this presentation will be available on the website afterwards, so you can see this. Thank you for listening.